Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. The event will be starting shortly.
It's one that is finished.
Lovely to see you all. If we could actually just to put yourselves on mute, that would be great. It is interactive and we would love you to participate a little bit later on, but if we could just put you on mute for now, that would be great. Thank you all. Just admitting a few more, so we will be starting shortly. And just a few more and we are ready to start.
Buon appetito.
You got my mouse, that's the problem. I got you.
Okay. And Joanna, we're ready, so I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Gus. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be able to host today's session. And thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. It was great to see some familiar names on our attendees list, but equally exciting is to see our guests as we opened the session to non-members of CITF as well. So a very warm welcome to all of you. Now, let's stop for a second and think what comes to your mind when you think of Agile. Do you think of IT? Do you think about delivering results fast? Do you think about developing software, or do you think broader, working as a team, working with multiple self-organizing teams, collaborating with customers, integrating business and IT? It would be great to hear from you what comes to your mind when you think of Agile. So please use Zoom chat and YouTube facilities as well to share your ideas, share your thoughts, ask any questions, and provide us with your feedback as well. We hope that, as always, you will be able to give us some sort in feedback form as well. And if you would like to follow up with our guests today, please remember to tick in the box in the feedback form or email us directly. We're very happy to do later introductions. Asking all those questions, what IT means to us, I think, we'll probably come to conclusion very quickly that there's no single answer. And it's interesting for us to see that this year, focus on Agile in our program is driven by CITF's member curiosity on how Agile is implemented in organization, from small teams to large corporates that have thousands of employees working in a smart way. So I'm delighted to have this discussion, ongoing discussion within CITF, to be enriched by our today's panelists. We welcome very warmly Patrick Tickle, Chief Product Officer from PlanView, and Tony Gilling, Senior Solutions Architect from PlanView. Patrick and Tony, I know that I understand that PlanView has become their own case study in Agile transformation. So I wonder if you could tell us more about your role in this Agile journey within PlanView, and also how that all happened.
Yeah, I think that's kind of that's a big part of the topic for today. So yeah, no, it's great to be here. Yeah, so sorry. Yeah. So as Joanna said, my name is Patrick Tickle. I'm the Chief Product Officer at PlanView. Been here for 15 years and have been a big part of our transformation. And Tony, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Tony Giddings. So my role with PlanView is to help organizations that are on that transformational journey with PlanView solutions. I actually joined PlanView through an acquisition, previously working with an organization that was very agile. So actually my experience of PlanView's journey has been one of being a little bit impatient with the organization, the pace of the change. So it's been a good lesson, a reminder for me about how hard the transformational journey can be.
Thank you very much. That was, was really interesting when we had earlier discussions a couple of weeks ago when we started to prepare for this journey, to hear views about Agile transformation. And I know that you have prepared some slides to be able to illustrate, what Agile journey possibly looks like and share your experiences of transformation within PlanView. So I just want maybe we can start with that and then move on to some questions. And again, audience, please feel free to put your questions in the chat room. I'll do my best to pick up on all the questions and make sure that Tony and Patrick have time to answer those.
All right. Well, let's thanks for all that. Let's get started. All right, Tony. All right. So look, it's great to be here today, and Tony and I, spend a lot of time talking to a lot of our customers and prospects on this whole topic of Agile transformation. And like I said, we'll talk a lot about, we saw a lot of the questions beforehand are about how to get started, right? Which I think is great. There's a lot of topics to dig in there, which I think, again, I think we've learned a lot from our own internal Agile transformation here at PlanView. So we'll use, I think we can, it's great that we have so much personal experience, and Tony's got it from past lives. I have it here at PlanView to kind of talk about, how to get started and the ways to make this journey happen. I will say that, almost every conversation that I'm in with customers and, possibly potential customers, these things are going on in every organization right now, right? I think as Joanna just said, right, there's obviously a lot of disruption in the marketplace. The Agile scale topic is, I think reached a level of kind of mainstream critical mass that we frankly haven't seen before. And it's a part of almost every organization at this point, right? The team Agile has been around for 20 plus years, right? But we've gotten to the place where Team Agile is now at scale in so many organizations that we're trying to revisit ways to operate at scale, right? And that topic is front and center with almost every organization I spend time with. There are things that come along with that. I think the shift, we'll talk about this a little bit, the shift to a product-centric mentality, a value stream-centric mentality that comes along with the at-scale kind of model is a big, arguably just as big a shift for a lot of organizations. And then clearly, right, this whole environment that we're in right now, continue to be working from home, I think has accelerated this, right? I think if you see, a lot of the principles we'll talk about in Agile scale are really, about incremental planning, right? And I think in the world we're in today, incremental planning has become the default way we have to work, right? I think the organizations are still trying to figure out how to work in an annual planning model in the world that we're living in today, that it just doesn't work, right? And so I think all these things have come together. And frankly, the other part is, look, there's a lot of technology out there now, right? There's a lot of alternatives, and people are searching for kind of the right platforms, to kind of bring this to life. And obviously at PlanView, we spend a lot of time on that. I mean, we're not going to spend as much time on that here today, but it's a big part of the landscape as well. So I was just sort of alluding to this idea, right? This is kind of the planning world that most of us know from, for years and years. If you haven't switched to an Agile model, this, kind of annual planning model, the bars here, if you, the vertical, the vertical axis here is kind of the on strategy factor, I call it, right? So how on strategy is the plan, right? And, in that annual planning model, it's the plan is most likely the most on strategy the day you finish it, right? Like the day you're done, it's completely on strategy. And then every quarter that goes by throughout your annual, your planning cycle, right? It kind of, loses some relevancy, right? Market conditions change. Competitive landscape changes. Customers have different requirements, but the thing that worked was it's at the end of Q4, right? Yeah, you would go back and do an annual plan. You'd sort of reset and you'd kind of do this whole motion, right? Well, I think one of the things that certainly has happened in the world of in the world we're living in now, right, is that we've lost a lot of those annual planning rituals, right? We've lost the that we were able to leverage in the past, right? So you think about it. It's hard to see 12 to 18 months into the future, over a 90-minute Zoom call, right? So, how did we do annual planning, right? We would all get together, right? We'd bring together leadership teams at corporate headquarters, or you do offsites at hotels and conference centers, and you kind of like immerse yourself in a very intense, kind of interactive session for a week or something like that, multiple days of planning, to try to get to and weeks of work to get to the place where you could build an annual plan. Obviously, in the world we're in right now, that's just not possible, right? And so as a result, that reset really didn't happen at the end of last year, right? When people, if your fiscal year, if you're planning, let's assume your planning calendar was an annual calendar, at the end of last year, I think I talked to a lot of organizations who struggled to figure out their annual plan for 2021, right? Because they just didn't have a lot of the process rituals for like building a plan, right? So I contend that one of the things is that reset didn't really happen, and I use this term, kind of strategic atrophy, right? People are still running off of maybe the plan they built in 2019, right? And trying to iterate off of that if they don't have a more incremental planning model. And that's obviously a bad place for any organization to be in, right? So this idea, right, of getting to this incremental, planning cadence, which we will talk a lot about, and is obviously at the core of the the scaled agile kind of model, is I think what mitigates a ton of this kind of atrophy problem, right? And shifting yourself to this, and again, we'll talk about here how we did it at PlanView, but shifting to this 10-week program increment, continuous planning iteration model, is how we have made this shift, but it's how we see lots of our customers and people I speak to every day. It's the end state they're trying to get to. Maybe before I hop on, Tony, I mean, I know you talk to lots of customers all the time. This is a pretty consistent story you hear from people, but I mean, what are your thoughts on this topic?
One of the most interesting things I've found, especially after this last year and a bit, is attitudes to change have changed. And it used to be that we were approached with change to our plan. This is a bad thing. This is going to cost money. This is going to introduce risk. Now people have changed. They welcome change. They're going to organize themselves to welcome that change, to be able to react to that change, because that change is going to save them money. It's going to actually reduce risk. So finally, people's attitude to change is itself.
Yeah, I think, obviously we've gone through enough of this work from home model that I think the idea of like, well, it's all going to go back to normal, that moment has kind of passed, right? So I do think you're right. People have realized like things are now going to have to change, right? Because even in the future, right, like we're probably not all going to go back to the office, right? We're going to be in some hybrid mode, right? That's still going to require, first of all, these incremental principles, I think, end up being better for organizations, but we're still going to need, we're going to need these kinds of tools to do planning in the future, because I think a lot of those standard rituals and ceremonies are just not going to come back anytime soon. So, I always talk to people about this is how we're working today. We're kind of working a little bit like that right now. I've used this slide for a year or two. The one thing the setup on this slide, and I don't, I know we have a lot of international attendees, but in the United States, So at PlanView, we're a Zoom and Slack shop. That's like that. We live in Slack and we live in Zoom. I work with lots of companies that live in Teams. For example, is probably the other major alternative. But one in the U.S., I always laugh about Slack's tagline here in the U.S. Is that Slack, the marketing tagline says, where work gets done, right? And I always joke that look, I'm in Slack all day long, right? I mean, it's like I'm probably in Slack more than I'm in email, and it's a really important part of my job. But I contend that not a lot of work gets done in Slack. That is not actually where work gets done. I always find that tagline kind of entertaining, right? Because I communicate and I stay in touch with people, and I it's literally kind of how I create, it's how we communicate in this world, but it's not really how work gets done, right? And at PlanView, what I would contend is what has changed, right, is that this is how work now really gets done at PlanView. And I will move this one over here for a second. I'll just get rid of that one for a second. This idea, right, of from a tooling perspective of this layer of incremental planning, right, and the tooling behind program increment planning. And again, we'll talk more about that. Whether you're an agile, if you're kind of a hardcore agilist, you would call this agile program management. The classic program board. I think for maybe a little bit more mainstream of a PMO audience, sometimes it's called portfolio Kanban, right? People think about Kanban. I think a lot of people associate Kanban as a team kind of, entity, like we're a Kanban team versus a Scrum team versus we're a continuous delivery team, that model. What's really emerged in the marketplace, I think over the last 12 to 18 months is that, yes, that Kanban layer is super important for teams, but this portfolio Kanban layer, the team of teams, visualization of work, that is the center point of scaled agile. I think, in my opinion, Tony, I assume you would agree with that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it seems only about probably 5 or 6 years ago, we started to talk about programming from planning, or that mid-range planning, or big room planning, as we refer to it then, because in excess of 100 people with good facilitation, and people, they were really valuable meetings, and they're great. And I think our challenge now, how can we keep that energy, that benefit that we got from everybody coming together to collaborate and work on a plan remotely? Because we don't have.
So Tony, brand new. I've never said this word before, right? But so at PlanView, hold on. So we don't do big room planning anymore. We do big Zoom planning now. I've never actually played, but that is exactly kind of what we do, right? And we, so we used to big room plan, right? Because we started our transformation, probably 24 months ago, for the year prior to COVID, maybe 28 months ago. And our initial program increment planning and our first value stream, which I'll talk a lot about in a second, was all big room, right? And that was, it was probably helpful that we did it that way to start. But we did, as soon as COVID hit, we were fortunate that we had the process muscle in place, right? That we were able to just switch to a virtual format. But again, we just finished 2 weeks, of PI planning here at PlanView across all 3 of our value streams, and literally hundreds of employees participate in that planning cycle, and it's all through Zoom and all leveraging Lean Kit, right? But again, that portfolio Kanban layer as the tooling to make it happen, right? If those of you who've done API planning, I will tell you that the greatest feature enhancement in the last 12 months within Zoom is the breakout room. If you're trying to run big room planning virtually, the breakout room functionality of Zoom has made the logistics. It's funny how little features like being such a big deal, but the ability to kind of bring everybody, quote unquote, into a virtual big room and then break into teams, all in the same contiguous kind of Zoom environment. That feature actually is a huge productivity gain in terms of doing virtual, Zoom room, big Zoom planning. So at PlanView,
if you think about scaling up Agile, and when you think about this building blocks, is that Agile consists of transparency, collaboration. How did you find that to be able to maintain that when you were scaling up Agile within PlanView?
Well, I would say actually the scaling, the process actually brought a lot more transparency to the organization. It wasn't about keeping the same. It actually brought a lot more, right? I mean, I think the whole process brings a lot more transparency, I think, across the whole organization. I don't know, Tony, go ahead. You probably have some thoughts on this one as well.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't underestimate the cultural change that's required. It's not just a process change. You need, the executives to lead by example, which we had, which was great. But you need people to feel that they're safe in the environment. They're safe to make those changes, because not all of them are going to come to fruition. And if they had an idea, they've made a change, it hasn't quite worked out, fine, let's just stop, let's learn from it, let's move on. Not, actually, I've made a mistake, that's terrible, I'm going to be punished. So it's creating that environment, creating that trust, which doesn't happen overnight, that you can, and it's that cultural change.
Yeah, for sure. But a big benefit of the cultural change is, to your point, Joanna, is a lot more transparency. I mean, it's, I think that we, I'll tell you, for example, like as one of the leaders of the company, right? We do company all hands meetings, I'm sure most of you, we do large company, and that's a part of, organizational transparency. But, when you're talking to thousands of employees about, hey, we had a great quarter, here's what's happened, you kind of have to speak to a pretty, simple summarized message about your entire organization. At PlanView, right, we now PI plan across 4 value streams, with the 3 primary ones on this page, right? We have our product value stream, our go-to-market value stream, which is sales and marketing, and then we have our kind of customer success or go-to-customer value stream, our teams that interact directly with customers. One of the beauties of PI planning is every 10 weeks we now have an all hands essentially with the value stream, right? And I find it's a super valuable thing, because the very front of the PI planning process, the very kickoff is PI program increment, right? Someone just asked the question. So PI planning stands for program increment. It's one of the core components of the SAFe methodology. It's also, but it's really that 10-week increment that is the planning increment, right? But every 10 weeks, I always feel like it's like we have a value stream all hands, right? And the very front of it is that an hour of business context between the kind of the leadership of that value stream, where we can really have an all hands that gets into a lot more detail that's contextually tied to what's really important to the business, right? I mean, again, company all hands are important, right? And giving people a shared perspective of the whole business. But as I've done these, as we've put PI planning in place, and I think about what we used to do from a company all hands perspective, and then from a functional all hands perspective, these value stream, the PI planning and the kind of the kickoff and and even just the component we do about speaking about the context plan of what we're planning for I think has created a ton of transparency and is immensely valuable for all of our employees, to speak to, actually speak in a value stream context as opposed to a functional or just company context.
And I think that transparency and that visibility is not only to show how, the good things and how well everything's going.
Totally.
But also where there are problems, we've had situations only today where someone said to me, oh, someone's looked at the board that I've got all of our work on, and there's so much on there, we can't actually see what you're doing. Can you remove some of that from the board and put it on another one? Well, no, actually, if you can't see what's going on the board, you're probably doing too much at once. Think about, so maybe think about introducing WIP limits, focusing on flow, which you would do with a Kanban board. And that's appropriate at team level, program level, and also the portfolio level.
Yeah. So as Joanna was saying, and and Tony, change is a big part of this, right? Every customer, everybody I speak to is on this journey, right? And it's really hard. You can't just come in on Monday morning and be a lean organization. There's just no way that happens, right? And again, it takes work, right? And so many customers that we work with, are kind of like literally trying to go through this picture, right? We've been talking about this picture for a while. It's this idea of moving from traditional, I would say, heavy command and control, governance centric PPM, which, oh, by the way, there's a lot of places and companies where that's still really important, right? Where you're managing large initiatives and large spend. We're understanding the kind of the milestones, and the financial implications of those milestones. It's core to how you run your business, right? But then there's sort of modern PPM, which I think is still like project centric kind of business model, right? But it's about giving the team, more a more productive kind of team centric experience to get their work done, right? And there's a whole lot of kind of product innovation going on in that space. And then when you go to lean portfolio management, right, that's the things that we're talking about. There's a lot more process change, right? There's cultural change. It's very different. But what I see in most organizations is, you're never in one of these states, and there's not like a Monday you transition from column 1 to column 2, and then 12 months from now you transition from column 2 to column 3. Most companies have a mix of these operating models, right? And I think that's part of that's a big part of who PlanView is today, right? Is that we pragmatically understand that living in this continuum is super important, and building frameworks and product that supports this whole view is kind of core to who we are, because we've lived in all three of these columns, for a long. Well, we lived in column 1 and column 2 for many for decades, but for the last 3 or 4 years, we've become much more. The column 3 world has become a big part of who PlanView is as well. It's interesting, right? That Gartner. Gartner's starting to talk about the same thing. I think this is I'm going to reference 2 interesting reports that are both available on planview.com. But this one, this is their perspective on the same kind of journey that I just showed, right? And it's the PMO journey, where business, you kind of have business focus versus technical focus on the y-axis, back office versus front office. I would say kind of back office versus again, business. And you can kind of see, right, the classic asset-oriented PMO, back office, technology-focused, moving to what they're calling an enterprise portfolio management office, which is somewhere in the middle, but then ultimately all the way to a lean portfolio management office that's very much, front end, much more business, and oh, by the way, probably value stream and product focused, right, as opposed to project focused in the bottom left of this, right? Again, I think the right answer ultimately is a continuum. We have projects we have to deliver. We have products we have to deliver. We have value streams that make that happen. But you can see that they are starting to speak in similar language. The other thing, and we will get into this in a second, this is the other report I was alluding to, because I know people are always asking, how to get started, right? But this report's also available on planview.com. But one of the things they call out, and Tony just alluded to it a second ago, right? I think recommendation number 2 in this article, right? It's PMOs in digital evolution, right? Which is kind of this left to right transformation, is this point, right? If you're in evolution, the first thing you can do, right, is leverage portfolio Kanban to create visibility of all your work, right? And that's a very different, kind of quote unquote portfolio management than traditional PPM people are, kind of accustomed to. I don't think it has to replace, traditional PPM, but this whole idea of portfolio Kanban is I believe that it's a huge part of the future of portfolio management, but I also think it's the linchpin in making the transformation happen, right? And I'll talk in a slide or 2. We'll kind of bring a few more of these points together. I see the comment here about someone saying safe structure is a bit over prescriptive, right? Yeah, it's so, and Tony probably, I'll give you yes, it's evolved into a massive framework, right? With a lot of pieces and a lot of components. The one thing that I will say as we go through this, I think if you simplify the world down, frankly, to, program increment planning and the program board, right? Like literally what, you can, that's all we've done at PlanView, right? I mean, I could argue there's all the other parts of it, but the entire transformation that we've been through over the last 24 months was because in that entire framework, we literally just said, look, shifting to the incremental program increment planning model and the tooling behind that is being, frankly, as simple and as clean as a lean kit and a portfolio Kanban layer. Just doing those two things really are what we pulled out of SAFe that drove our transformation. But I'm sure, Tony, I know you know that question really well.
Well, I mean, what is it? So I'm going to misquote a quote that said, "All frameworks are wrong, but some are useful." So it is fairly prescriptive, SAFe. But what are we on now? Version 5 point something. So Steve Leffingwell's not put it out there and said, this is what you've got to do. What he said is, from what I've learned and from the lean and agile practices, this is what I've seen that's been successful. And he's tried to scale up that iterative planning to a portfolio level. And he's the first one to say, if you say to Dean Leffingwell, no, it doesn't work for us, he'll say, change it then.
Yeah.
So even though it's prescriptive, it is as modeled, and it's a framework, and it's as good and it's as bad as frameworks are.
Tony, would you tell how to structure big Zoom planning meetings Patrick referred to? Any tips for Anna there?
Yeah, maybe as we go through this slide, I'll touch on that. Okay.
Great, right. Thank you.
Yeah. So this is kind of I will tell you, I put together, because I get the question all the time, right? Okay, how do you get started? And I've touched on a few of these things, right? But there's really kind of I think three parts of this, right? And actually, we just touched on one of the middle part here in a second. But the first thing I would say is, look, as you guys all know, right, everyone on this call has done some degree of transformation and or methodology implementation. It's definitely starting small is the right way to start, right? You've got, in my opinion, finding a place where there is where there's frankly a acute team of teams coordination opportunity or problem, right? That's the place to start, right? And I will tell you that at PlanView, we actually ended up starting outside of our technology teams. Our technology teams were all doing Scrum, and they were all, look, we've been doing Agile in all of our development teams for well over 10 or 15 years. But in terms of scaling Agile, we actually started in our go-to-market value stream, so sales and marketing, right? And if you think about it, I think starting there in retrospect turned out to be a really good idea, right? Because first of all, as most of you probably, on this call have some degree of awareness, right? There's always tension between marketing and sales, right? Like how is marketing spending their time, right? Like they should be driving more leads instead of like creating more brand awareness, or what I don't understand the value of that webcast, or I don't understand the value of that program, right? And then the marketing people are like, well, the sales people don't understand how we build demand, and like they don't really understand that building demand is a multi-stage process, and that whole tension that is sometimes healthy, between sales and marketing, that absolutely can become unhealthy, right, is a classic example of leveraging a value stream mentality as opposed to a functional mentality, right? Because when you created a go-to-market value stream with a bunch of sales and marketing people in a big room environment, and you do that every 10 weeks, you create a lot more synergy on where you're going and why you're doing things between those two organizations. And the other thing I would say is, to column 2 in this picture, the sales and marketing people are not tooling propeller heads, right? they don't get enamored with the software. They don't like want to spend 9 months configuring the software to all their intricate processes, right? They just want a simple answer, right? And I think for us, obviously, we're big proponents of Lean Kit, right? But a super simple product like Lean Kit, and a single user interface, and that's Kanban, not just Kanban centric, but Kanban only. Like the tooling got out of the way, so it was kind of like, look, we're going to bring these two groups together, to the point Tony and I made before. We're going to focus in that giant SAFe framework. We're just going to focus on program increment planning. That's the part we're going to focus on. And the tooling is going to be dead simple. It's just Lean Kit and Portfolio Kanban, right? And that combination, I think, of line of business plus, again, simplifying the essence of SAFe down to what really mattered for, if you go back to the opening comments I made, and then simplifying the tooling, allowed us to accelerate transformation dramatically. Then the other last two things that I will add, which I'm sure then Tony will have some thoughts on this slide, there were two other big important things, right? A modest investment in coaching, and then I would say still a relatively modest investment in training, right? So we did, we brought on a scaled Agile coach, right? Not a team, not a Scrum level coach, but a scaled Agile coach, probably 2 years ago at the front end of this process. For the first year, he was a contractor, and we eventually converted him to a full-time hire. He reports to me, right? So I'm one of the C-level leaders of the company, and he is one of my direct reports, right? So he is organized in the company at a very senior level. He operates across our entire organization, and again, frankly, we invested in one headcount, right? Now, once he got here, I think we've had one or two other people that have kind of transitioned into coaching roles, but from an investment perspective, we didn't hire outside consultants and hundreds of coaches to get, and PlanView is about 1,000 employees today, right? So we're not a small company. We might be the size of a business unit for some of you in large global organizations, but we're not, we're 1,000-person company, and we made one FTE hire dedicated to this, which, oh, by the way, it was still hard to get that hire done, but once we got that done, you get a lot of leverage out of that one person. And then we did open up, SAFe training to almost all of our employees, right? And we said, look, and now I will say the other thing there was we had an internal certified SAFe trainer, which I think is another way. So again, for a relatively modest investment, right? I mean, we had an employee, who actually took on the role of becoming a trainer. And in probably 18 months, Tony, right? We probably trained half our employees on SAFe certification. We let everybody opt into that as a kind of career growth, training growth thing. We didn't say you only can come if you're part of the value stream. But again, we literally, so 2 employees, right? 2 incremental heads in our plan, gave us almost, infinite leverage in coaching and training. And in terms of, and then I think, to the question about, how do you structure, big Zoom meetings, right? The coaches are now have learned that, right? I mean, that's what we lean on. That's a big part of what we leverage. Steve Wolf, our scaled Agile coach, is that he, not only does he know the process, for PI planning and how we run it, but he also owns the logistics, and the cadence, and and how we leverage the agenda of getting through PI planning, and then how we leverage Zoom, and how we leverage Lean Kit, and how we leverage instant coffee, a kind of more collaborative tool. The tooling and the process, that is the responsibility of our coaching resources as well, and they do a great job of that. So this is my little retrospective on kind of why it worked for us, and I think why we were able to accelerate, again, dramatically change the way we run our company in a relatively short period of time. I mean, literally, we're on PI on go-to-market. I think we just finished PI 9 or 10, right? So we've been doing this for in I guess 2.5 years, in terms of quarters. Our product value stream probably just finished PI 5, I think, and then our go to customer success PI, we just finished PI 2, right? So we also worked our way through each value stream incrementally as we went through this. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say is having been associated with teams as they're going through the PI planning, it's been really interesting to see. You can give people training, you can tell them what the process is they're going to go through, but each time they've gone through PI planning, another little light bulbs come on, and they're less focused on saying, actually, we need to show that we're really busy all the time, and being comfortable with the fact that when they're being told, actually only plan to 60% capability, or 60% of your capacity, sorry, well, that doesn't sound right. That means 40% we're not planning anything. Building in that slack, because the last PI, you really got 60% of your capacity delivered. And it's starting to, things are starting to come alive. And people are, each PI, getting a bit more comfortable with it, getting a little more familiar with what they're doing, and finding the benefit that, because there's X amount of things on the backlog, if you're getting asked to do something, yeah, we can do that, but it means something's going to drop off the bottom and something we're not going to do. So lots of those things are coming through. It's taken a little bit of time, but each time more and more knowledge is being gained by the teams. It's been good to see.
I do think it's one of the, I probably should, one of the change managements in this whole thing, right, is obviously, especially I think for traditional practitioners of, PPM, is moving to the fixed team model, right? As Tony talked about, the idea of capacity, right, and capacity planning is very, very different, right, in this model, right? Yeah, we're not time carding people. We're not obviously doing bottom up, getting bottom up telemetry on how people are spending their time, but as you create fixed teams, to Tony's point, and you go through each iteration, teams figure out like what their capacity is. And it's just like on the development side years and years ago, right? You at the front end of this process, teams take on too much work. They think they can do more than they possibly can, and the first 2 or 3 PIs that you do this, like everyone's plan blows up, right? And then as you get to like PIs 3 and 4, they start to figure out, oh, as a team, this is how much work we can actually handle, right? And again, it's not quantified down to like, and we're not even doing points, right? Like it gets into this rhythm of like, okay, and it gets into the visualization of the work. You're like, oh, there's too many cards, there's too many epics in this PI. Like we're not going to be able to get all that done, right? And I know it feels like a little bit of Zen, like you get a feeling for how much capacity you can handle, but as you build fixed teams, and those teams work together over iterations, right? Which again, that's why an annual planning model doesn't work, right? If you're going to create a fixed team and only iterate every 12 months, you never get there, right? But if you're iterating every 10 weeks like this, you can start to get that sense of like what team capacity feels like, and the planning gets better and better. One of the rituals in PI planning, right, is at the end, the confidence vote. I don't know how many guys the very final ritual of PI planning is in the big Zoom meeting, right? Is to literally vote 1 through 5, right? Every team member votes. So you've got 75 people in a Zoom or in a room, and everybody votes 1 through 5, right? 5 being this is the best plan we've ever had. 0, this plan is horrible. The key number is really everybody has to be a 3 to 5, 3, 4, or 5 to like move forward. If anybody throws, if anyone throws a 2, right? A 2 is I don't believe in the plan, right? And if one person, 75 people, if one person throws a 2, the process stops and we do not move forward, right? And look, in those first PIs, there were a lot of 2s, because people were stressed, right? They're like, I don't believe in this plan. Like, we're not going to get all this work done, right? I would say the plans, the PIs we just finished, I mean, we don't get a lot of 5s, but because 5s are kind of euphoric, right? But I mean, we steadily have increased, got to more and more, 4s versus even 3s in our confidence votes. And that's all because people have a better sense of like the team capacity and understanding what they can get done. And, Esther, I know, lives in those teams, right? And she's lived through that drama and the angst and the stress at the front end of that process. But where we are today, like as you iterate through, you get to a much, much better place in terms of your predictability and capacity.
So do you find that rituals are a really important component of this Agile journey?
Well, for sure. But Tony, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, I think when I first joined it was a small organization. It was agile from the ground up. Everyone was completely agile. I kind of felt a little bit uncomfortable to start off with, because there are some rituals like Roman voting, Vista 5. We also, I mean, I went into a room full of 50 people, everyone making a noise before the meeting started, and people put their hand up in the air. I didn't realize what was going on. Apparently, if you put your hand in the air, you can't talk. And so basically, rather than someone shout to get everyone quiet to bring the meeting to order so they can start, they're quiet. And you put your hand up, you don't talk. And quickly, that meeting room came right down. So some of the rituals are a little bit odd to start off with. But once you get going, they're really, really useful. And things like lean coffee. We introduced lean coffee, where the agenda for meetings is driven by the people in the meeting. So they get to talk about what they want to talk about. What I would say is, don't just follow the rituals. Don't just follow the process. Don't think because you're doing agile things, you're behaving in an agile way. Just because you do retrospectives, and one of the things to watch out for is what here is in effect retrospectives. If you're doing retrospectives and nothing happens, and the same old things come up each time, well, they're pretty pointless. So really focus on the outcomes of what you're doing. Think about the objectives of what you're trying to achieve. OKR is a great way of doing that. Objectives and key results, to measure the effectiveness of what you're doing rather than how much work you've done. But I would say for the rituals, just be careful you're not just going through the motion and you're doing it.
And I think it's also fair to look, I've become a full believer in this, and there's a lot of things that are really great, that have been great for the organization. And I think ultimately have tied to a lot of improved kind of performance and outcomes for PlanView. But I will also absolutely tell you, and again, Esther's going to nod her head. PI planning is hard, right? It's not, see, look at Esther. I mean, it is not like although we talk about, I've positioned, obviously how important it is and the benefits of it, but 4 days, it's a 4 day, in Zoom, it's a 4 day process, right? And so it's a big time commitment, right? And for a value stream, right? And it's exhausting. Like when PI planning is over, people are ready to go home, right? Or they're ready to turn their Zoom off, right? I mean, there were things about it that were actually in the big room context, when we physically were together, there's things about it that were better, right? Because there's just more team interaction. There's more social interaction in the evenings, to kind of recharge to get for the next day of planning, but it's also more efficient, I would say, in the big Zoom model. In some ways, we've learned a lot about how to make it more efficient by doing it virtually. But don't be misled. It's a rigorous process, right? And it's 4 hard days of work, to kind of get from, the front end of business context all the way, to a plan that everybody agrees to, because look, at the end of the day, we all have more work, we all have more demand, right, than we have resources. And ultimately the process is about, prioritizing, right, and mapping priorities to capacity, but again, for the next 10 weeks, right? But I do think that's one of the beauties of it. I think people feel people feel better once you get used to it. You feel better about prioritizing because you're kind of like, hey, we'll get to that in the next increment, right? It's not like we'll get to that in next year's plan. It's like, look, or it's quote unquote agile as well. There are ceremonies throughout the PI that if a priority changes, we have mechanisms to make changes, right? So I do think the incrementalism is ultimately the biggest change, right? Probably the fixed team component, right? And then the incremental model. But I think once people get used to the incremental model, it actually gives you it's a great place to be, right? But it is PI planning is a lot of work. It's a big time investment, and it takes a lot of time. So a question about fixed teams. So fixed teams. Basically, if you think about classic project teams, right? We have a project, we're going to bring these 10 people together to go work on this project, right? And then when the project's over, we go away. The fixed team model is we're going to have a team, an agile team, these 6 to 8 people that are now a team, and they are a team that work comes to the team, as opposed to a team being brought together for the project or for the work, right? So Esther is part of an agile team that she functionally reports into marketing, but really her day-to-day is this team of 6 to 8 people that she is in, that's cross-functional, that is really the entity that she works within every day, right? But that team is a committed team that spans PIs, right? We don't reteam, the PI, the teams are constant, and the PIs decide what work comes to the teams, right? We don't get together in PI planning and shuffle teams, or, say, hey, these people can go work on that. You do need to have, to make this work, you've got to have the concept of fixed teams in place, which is, again, for a lot of organizations, that's a pretty big change to work through.
There's a question also about 4 days planning over 10 weeks. And we're really, if we were coming together in a big room, it would probably be 2 days. But because we're geographically dispersed, we're in different time zones. The people in Europe, for example, PR planning starts around lunchtime.
Right.
And we try and organize the events so that the breakouts are done in people's time zones, but the meetings where everyone comes together to present is done when the times overlap. So this is why we talk about it's over 4 days.
Especially with Zoom. With Zoom, we have learned that it's kind of 4 half days. We kind of go for mornings because people can't, you can't do 2 straight full days of Zooming, right? Everybody loses their mind. When it's in 4 days, it's really 4 half days, right? And there's off-cycle discussions that happen outside of it, but it's really more effectively probably 2 days in terms of total committed time. And if you think about that, if you take that 2 to 3 days times 4 quarters or 4 PIs, right? That's like 8, that's 8 to 10 days of planning. And if we were going to go build an annual plan, right? Like we were going to do what's our plan for next year, I'm sure we would spend at least, 8 days of work building an annual plan. So I think if you kind of think about, like for like, in an incremental planning model versus an annual planning model, it's probably pretty close, right? But it is, but it's just done on a quarterly basis as opposed to an annual basis.
Now, I would also suggest if you've got a plan where you've got the whole teams of teams that buy into and voted and understand what the objective is and have bought into what they're going to deliver, that's pretty good value for money, I think, on those people's time. They're all going to be put in the right direction.
Yep. Well, I think we pretty much, that's pretty much the content we had for today, right? I think hopefully we've been watching the chat and answering, questions as we go along. But if there's any other questions we've missed, while Tony and I were talking, we missed the chat feed. We have a few minutes left. More than happy to hit any questions, or also let the team from CITF kind of wrap us up and close out. Right.
That's great. Thank you, Patrick and Tony. So we have, I don't know if you can see me on screen actually.
What slide would you like to be on, Cassandra?
No, that's fine. So we just have one more question.
Okay.
So has PlanView observed increase in any specific industry or sector?
I did see that. Yeah, I would say not really. I mean, I think our business has stayed pretty consistent, from a vertical perspective. I don't know, Esther, would you? I think, I don't think, there's, again, I think the agile side of the market has definitely increased, a lot, right? But I think, but in terms of actual industries and verticals, I'd say things have stayed pretty consistent for us.
Yeah, I think certainly retail is obviously. I mean, you've just got to walk down the high street to see the difference in retail. So they've been keen to become reactive to change quite well. We've seen a drop off in some white goods manufacturers, aerospace, but you would expect that. There'll be a downturn in those sorts of industries. And banking and insurance and that sort of thing, they were already on their journey prior to COVID hitting.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Thank you so much thank you both for being here. I'm just going to share my screen so then I can take over. But thank you both for being here with us. It has been great. It's been so informative. If there are any other questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. We are running out of time on questions, but we are happy to take those questions and come back to you with any answers that we don't cover today. The slides will be available, so that's great. Yeah, so fantastic. So just to say thank you both. If anyone has got any questions, we'll leave it just a few minutes just so that you can bring those through. It would be great to just get those just before we have to sign off.
Yeah, it looks like we're kind of wrapping up, but like I said, if anybody's got any questions, like again, Tony and I'm just ptickle@gmail. I'm ptickle@Planview. I guess you could email me at Gmail too, but that's probably just ptickle@Planview. But obviously you can go through CITF, and it's great talking about this story. I know everybody's trying to figure this out. It's a hugely beneficial change. Now I see Angie's. I kept referring to Esther, but Angie's lived through this, in much detail as well. And it's hard work, but it's absolutely worth the journey. And once you get on the other side of this, we talk about this all the time. It's hard to imagine ever going back, right? Right, Angie? It's like it's hard to believe going back to the way we worked prior to this model is almost impossible to imagine, right? So it's a very good, but it's a hard journey, but one worth it. So, all right.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So we have just dropped into the chat box a feedback form, and it would be amazing if you could complete that. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the sessions, and again, any questions that you have, we can pick them up from the feedback and get back to you. We would also like to just update you on CITF. We're here for networking and knowledge sharing. So please feel free to check out the website, check out the details. We have a project management special interest group, which is taking place later this month in May. And then we also have an Agile special interest group. So these are just a few of the networking things that we have available from CITF. So again, it has been a pleasure to have Patrick and Tony and the Planview team here with us. If you have any questions, you can follow them on LinkedIn, and you can also follow us on LinkedIn, and we will see you again very soon. Thank you all for joining us today. It's been great, and we will see you soon. Take care.
Goodbye. Yeah, have a great evening, everybody. Stay safe out there. All right, take care. Bye-bye.